Hi, welcome to my new series called Emo Astrology, where I tell you about astrology, about things that no one cares about but me. I want to talk about Harambe. Harambe was a gorilla that was unalived at Cincinnati Zoo on May 28th, 2016. He was born May 27th, 1999, which means he actually was unalived the day after his birthday. Not only that, but he was a Gemini, but we'll get into all of that. On May 28th, 2016, Harambe was in his enclosure when a child fell into his enclosure. Harambe proceeded to drag this child through the water, and then at one point he was hovering over the child, and the main argument that people partake in is whether or not Harambe meant harm or if he was going to hurt said child. There's also debate over whether or not Harambe should have been unalived. I decided, however, to look at his astrology to see if we could see if Harambe meant harm or if he was just a very sweet creature. I love Harambe, and I was very sad when I found out about his unaliving in 2016, and I'm still sad to this day because he's an animal. I'm almost kind of vegan. I really love animals, and that made me sad. And I also really love Geminis. Gemini is my favorite sign. So let's go ahead and get into the astrology. Can astrology tell us whether or not Harambe meant well in this case? And could his birth chart also have predicted his passing on that day? Let's discuss. So, Harambe was born May 27th, 1999 in Brownsville, Texas. He was a Gemini with a Scorpio moon. What's interesting about Scorpio moon is the moon sign can actually tell you about your relationship with your parents, either your mom or your father or both. In some cases, having a Scorpio moon can point to having a deep maternal wound. So, some might say mother issues, right, mommy issues, or just having some sort of trauma or deep sadness with your mother, some sort of issue with your mother. And that was actually the case for Harambe because he had a mother wound, because zookeepers had reported, and his foster father, who was also a zookeeper, reported that his mother had rejected him as a child. So that would mean that Harambe had a mother wound. He was rejected by his mother. Astrology is very real, guys. And so that is why he had a foster father, which was a zookeeper. And this foster parent basically raised him because his mother wouldn't do it. Later on in life, Harambe was moved to the Cincinnati Zoo. I think he was originally in Texas. I could be wrong about that, but he was somewhere else, and he was moved to Cincinnati, Ohio, the Cincinnati, Ohio Zoo. So now let's just look at the very surface level astrology of Harambe. He was a Gemini. Gemini, they're known for being very quick-witted and also quite mischievous and sneaky. They're ruled by Mercury, and Mercury has a lot of, I think there's some Greek or Roman mythology lore behind the sign of Gemini. They're just a very sneaky, a little bit conniving sign, right? I love Geminis, though. They're my favorite sign. They're very sneaky. They are associated with thieves and stealing in astrology, right? They're very sneaky signs. That's the whole point. They're sneaky. They're very silly. They're tricksters. They're the tricksters of the zodiac. What's interesting is his foster parent, who was a zookeeper, actually reported that Harambe was a very silly goose. He was a very silly Billy. He was a kind of a wild, a loose cannon, right? He was known for throwing water at zookeepers. He was known for taking blankets from zookeepers and running away with said blanket just so that the zookeepers would chase him. And he also was known for throwing himself off of things so that the zookeepers would catch him, or for attention. I think that's very fun, and it's also very on brand for a Gemini. That's a very Gemini thing. And I think even to tie it into the incident that happened when the child fell into the enclosure, I really do wholeheartedly believe that I think he was just being a little bit silly. I don't really think it was ill-intentioned. He's a Gemini. He's a trickster. Another thing about Geminis is, honestly, as someone who knows a lot of Geminis and Gemini placements, one-on-one and friendships and life and dating, I think that at their core, they are very sweet people, which makes me think that, Harambe, I think he was a little bit misunderstood. I think he did have the right intention. I think he was a sweetheart at his core. I think he had the right idea, wrong delivery, right? And that is honestly kind of on brand for Geminis. As someone who knows a lot of Geminis, I feel like they have the right idea, usually just wrong delivery sometimes. And I love them. I really do wholeheartedly. Now, let's move on to a little bit more of the deeper astrology that Harambe had. I do believe that Harambe had a very sweet energy to him. The reason why I say this too is because he has a Cancer Venus. Venus is how you show your love. Cancer being there just means he was a very sweet boy. He was a sweet gorilla. He really was. I think he was at his core. It's a very nurturing sign. This placement is very nurturing. Cancer also is a sign that is associated with the mother. So when it's in Venus, in this case, I would say that he actually had a maternal instinct. I think that in this case, he was someone who was very motherly. He did have a maternal instinct. And it showed. He just, again, right idea, wrong delivery. So now moving on, he had a Libra Mars. Mars is a planet that represents aggression and how you show your anger. It shows how you show passion, right? And Libra is a very fair diplomatic sign. It's a very balanced sign. So when you have Libra in Mars, what that essentially says is that when you're mad, you're very fair and balanced. So that being said, this tells me Harambe was not someone that was going to just lash out of nowhere. Opposed to if he had like an Aries Mars, that would be a whole different story. I would be sitting here and I'd be telling you, yeah, he was a very aggressive being. Like, yeah, he definitely meant to hurt that child, to be honest. No, Libra Mars is very diplomatic. That's a very diplomatic person. So I think Harambe, again, he was a very fair person when upset. So I don't even think he was angry in this case, to be honest. Now, what's interesting about this too is Libra is associated with justice, right? And also technically could be like the justice system or just fairness overall. And what's interesting in this case, not in every single case, but I think in this case it is prevalent. Mars is associated with endings as well as cutting and severing ties, abrupt endings, right? Like cutoffs, right? And so Libra is a sign that represents justice and the justice system and being done right. And when it's there, in this case, not in every single case, but I think this is prevalent in this case, Libra Mars, I think in this case, is almost like it feels as if there's an energy that says some sort of ending that's unfair. And in this case, I think it's very relevant. It feels very relevant in his case, right? Libra's justice, Mars is kind of like not the opposite, but it's more of it's an aggressive planet, right? It's also the cutting and severing of ties. So that just makes me think there has to be some sort of connection there. Now, furthermore, Harambe did have North Node in Leo. What's interesting about that is North Node can tell you a little bit more about what your purpose in this life is. And what's interesting is Leo is actually associated with fame and stages and being kind of just like out there and like perceived. So what's interesting about Leo is actually associated with children. And it's very interesting because Harambe had North Node Leo, which is his purpose. And in this case, there's a possibility that this could mean his purpose in this lifetime was to become well known and famous. And he did. And to even go deeper into that, he had the potential to become famous through something with a child, because Leo is associated with children in astrology, and Leo is also associated with fame in the public eye and like stages, right? Interesting. Moving on, again, Harambe had a Mars in Libra, right? And he had Jupiter in Aries. Now, what's interesting is Mars in Libra was in opposition with Jupiter in Aries. Aries represents authority. It could also be anything that's to do with like government officials or just someone who has power over you, right? And so does Mars. Okay, so he had Aries and Jupiter in opposition with Libra Mars. We talked about Libra and Mars, but these two were basically in opposition. What that means is there has to be, Mars is also about endings, right? It could be associated with like endings and the cutting and severing of ties. He was unalived by someone who had power over him and someone who had authority over him. He was unalived by, I think, someone who worked at a zoo, right? So that's someone who has power and authority over him. Now, what's even more interesting is that Aries is actually associated with the head in astrology. And he was unalived by being attacked to the head. And I bring this up because he had Jupiter in Aries and it was in opposition with Libra Mars. And opposition is typically a harsh aspect, right? It's like they don't mesh well. It can create friction, and astrology can tell you about, you know, how someone sometimes might pass or something along those lines, or might face some sort of accident, etc., etc. And so this opposition that was in his birth chart, this to me points to there being potential for him literally being unalived unfairly and by some sort of trauma or issue with his head. This points to there being potential to having some sort of accident that leads to some sort of unaliving with his head in an unfair, unjust matter, in my opinion. Now, again, I do hope that you guys take this with a grain of salt, as I am just an amateur astrology lover, really. I am not an astrologer. I just love astrology, and I just do this for fun on my free time. I'm obsessed with astrology. It's all I talk about. Everyone in my life, I'm sure, is so tired of me because it's all I want to talk about all the time. But I just love Harambe. I really do, because, again, like, I love animals, and I'm a vegan in training. I like to say. And I love astrology, and this was just so interesting to me because I found out he was a Gemini today. I don't know why, I thought of Harambe, and I was like, I wonder what his sign was. And he's a Gemini, and I was like, oh my god. No, I love Geminis. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you have any recommendations of anything that you want me to look into astrologically, let me know. I would love to do that. So I will see you guys next time on Emo Astrology. Mwah.